Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing okay. The markets have been choppy, and there's a lot of weird stuff happening out there in the market, especially things like the bond market and global fiat currencies. But there are some good on-chain indicators giving us some positive indications that the bottom could be in for Bitcoin. So let's get into it, everybody. It's Friday, and this is Friday Fire. And of course, this is not financial advice, just a guy on the internet. First of all, let's look at fear and greed. Fear and greed has come down a lot. Like for the last 2-3 months, it's been in north of 65, 70, and now it's all the way down at 50. And that's normally, as I say, when fear and greed gets down to 25, it's normally a good time to buy. So here we are. We're still away from 50 or away from 25, but still, it's not too bad. Let's look at the stock market too. They've been fearful for quite some time. They were neutral a month ago, but the last 3 weeks, fearful. And that's because of the global macro situation. The question is, how much are crypto and stocks correlated? That's the big thing. Let's get into some Bitcoin news first. You can see here, this is a cool chart, and it shows you how retail demand has changed dramatically over the last 30 days. Retail demand dropped 21.7% over the last 30 days. And people, we talk about tourists, they're like tourists. They're eager to show up when the excitement is buzzing, but quickly vanish the minute things start to quiet down. And that's what happens. They draw to $100,000. Everybody gets really excited and people kind of FOMO in. Then it falls to 93, 94K, 92K. And people lose interest and go off and do something else. And that's just how it works in the space, unfortunately. But that's okay, because there's a counterbalance to this. And this is, while the tourists vanish, the whales return. From Crypto Quant, after the little dump, whales are now accumulating Bitcoin again. And large players took advantage of the consolidation to open TWAP positions. That's time-weighted positions to be able to stack, not the OTC way, but buying straight off the market. And they are accumulating below $95,000. The price of Bitcoin as we speak right now is, let me pull up my trading view. Let's see what's going on. I should have had it open to begin with. Let me see. Bitcoin 92.5. Oh, 92.6. Not too good still. But off the lows, if we look at the last 5 days, it's still sucky. And as I've been saying for a while, up until the 20th of January, we will chop sideways. But there's a lot of also bad stuff going on in the markets we'll talk about in a second. But when we compare the Bitcoin drawdown to previous corrections, it's a nothing burger. So as Bitcoin Mugger says, grow a pair. And these are very, very shallow corrections compared to previous. In fact, if you look at the tiny little black dip right now, that's where we are compared to history. And if you compare to the previous cycles, falling down 40% during the bull run, and even before that, even higher in the pink cycles, down 70%, it's relatively calm. But again, people have short-term memories. Let's check out funding rates. This is from James Van Straten. He believes that when funding rates mark a bottom, or when funding rates turn negative, it marks a bottom. And although we are consolidating between 90,000 and 100,000, the perceptual funding rate briefly went negative yesterday, which tends to mark that local bottom in price, which is more good news. Now, this is also interesting. A lot of short-term holders were sending Bitcoin to the exchanges at a loss. On average, the short-term holder P&L is positive. It stands at about 1,100 Bitcoin, only slightly positive. In other words, profitable sales significantly outnumber sales at a loss during consolidation or correction phases, and it would be preferable to see more loss-making sales. But at the moment, such sales are extremely rare. But there are other short-term holders that are having a little bit of a problem. Just recently, short-term holders sell 23,000 Bitcoin at a loss. Some people refer to these people as paper handlers. They just can't take the pain. They bought at, say, 98,000 or 100,000 or 102,000. We were at 102,000, by the way, 3 or 4 days ago. It's bonkers. I made a quick post on that. We went from 102 to 92 in 2 days and 20 hours. It was a very aggressive, and that scares people. And that's why short-term holders can't take the pain anymore. And they get out. Even if they're down 10%, they just exit the trade and leave. Now, in other news, though, there is something quite startling as well. The U.S. entity's Bitcoin reserve now just hit an all-time high. It's now 65% higher than non US entities. That's a pretty big deal. I believe a lot of this has to do with the ETFs as well and firms like MicroStrategy. But now, again, US Bitcoin holdings hit a new all-time high, which is good. Now, shout out to Nick Szabo. He's an OG in the Bitcoin space. Bitcoin just got above 93K, by the way. He is joining a firm called Jan3, and they announced Nick Szabo as chief scientist. And his focus will be the mission of Hyperbitcoinization, a term that's been thrown around now for about 6 years. And he'll be exploring Bitcoin's impact on monetary policy, international trade, and all that other good stuff, sovereign nations, while aiding nations in Bitcoin integration. So that is really, really cool that the OGs are really getting involved. People like Adam Back as well in the space. Now, just to show you how big BlackRock IBIT, their spot ETF, has become. It's now a monster asset class. NASDAQ has proposed a rule change to increase position and exercise limits for iShares Bitcoin ETF from 25,000 to 250,000 contracts. Remember, each contract is 100 shares, 250,000 times 100 times approximately $50. That's a lot of option volume. So we'll see. And these higher limits are necessary to accommodate the ETF's significant market presence. Remember, the more financial tools that are around Bitcoin, the more TradFi money comes in. Yes, they will use this to hedge and trade and do all sorts of fancy things. But again, it's better for the asset as a class. It shows it's much more mature. Speaking of folks that are stacking Bitcoin, the MicroStrategy ballot is out. These are the 4 votes. The board recommends approving them all. But remember, Saylor controls 46% of the voting shares, and the board are for it too, so this vote is going to happen. Not saying it's not important to always vote, but I believe it's going to happen. And this is from Tina Woodby. Check your email. Time to vote for MicroStrategy's special meeting. I'm for all the way. A lot of people are scared by this. They think it's crazy dilution. But remember, they will be issuing a ton of shares to buy a ton of Bitcoin, which will make the Bitcoin price go up. So some of the Bitcoin OGs are very bullish on this because they want number go up. Some of the OGs are concerned that Michael Saylor is buying too much. So it's, what are you going to do? But everybody seems to be stacking as well. This is CleanSpark. They now HODL over 10,000 homemade Bitcoin. A US made, in fact. It was a funny stuff way back in the day where, I can't remember his name, the Canadian fellow, never off the TV. He talked about blood coins and he wanted clean Bitcoin, American or Canadian mined. Anyway, CleanSpark has now over 10,000 Bitcoin self-mined in the USA, and they have not been selling. Let's check in on some NAV premium numbers. They have fallen again. We had a little bit of a spike early January after a big dip. Now they're back again. But if you look at the winner here on this chart, you got Marathon. NAV premium is 1.47. Remember, they have a lot of real estate. They have a lot of IP. They have a lot of rigs and many other assets. So basically, you could argue that the mining company is holding them back because their NAV premium is very small. If you just looked at their Bitcoin holdings alone, yeah, it doesn't reflect the value of the business, but that's okay. MicroStrategy is 1.93. HUT is 2.43. Riot, 2.48. Semler Scientific, 2.57. And CleanSpark is now 3. So that's where they all stand right now. We track this every day. Now, Standard Chartered as well. Shout out to the Europeans out there in the audience. They are launching a Bitcoin and crypto custody services in Europe, and they'll create a new entity in Luxembourg. There's a lot of good stuff happening in Luxembourg right now. It's becoming very crypto-friendly like Switzerland, and we expect more of this. But the ability now for people to custody more Bitcoin safely using a large global financial institution is very big news for the space, especially for our friends in Europe. Now, a little bit of other crypto news too. Again, the markets in the US were closed yesterday due to a President Carter funeral. But this is some crypto news regarding Radium. They are launching a new perp platform. They have over 70 pairs, and they claim to have the lowest fees on these perp tradings. But remember, with perp trading, be very careful. Be very, very careful with leverage. Never, ever, ever put more than 1% of your, say, Solana bag into a perp. Ever. Stick to the rules. They will help you, guaranteed. Also, a lot of talk about Firedancer and Frankendancer. And this is some news from Will Hickey. They are trying to achieve a supermajority of a testnet this week to run Frankendancer. And if this happens, by the way, Frankendancer is related to Firedancer. It's like a version of it. And Firedancer is a project by the Solana Foundation, built by Jump, aimed to improve Solana's blockchain's performance, speed, get up to 1.2 million TPS, as well as help decentralization and also remove any legacy bugs from the former code, because this is all completely written on a brand new code base. And you can see here the mention of Firedancer version 0.3 is that Frankendancer iteration related to or derived from the original Firedancer. So that's coming soon. Many expect Firedancer to be up and running middle of this year, maybe a little bit later, but that will be a game changer for Solana as well. Now, UK economy, a little bit of bad news here before we get into some stock news as well and some other macro. Permanent job vacancies in the UK shrank at the fastest pace for over 4 years. There's lots of crazy stuff happening across the UK and Europe, and this is not good. I don't know if it's because of the weak economy or the impact of AI. The United Kingdom is very quick to adopt technology, and that could have had an impact on jobs as well out there. Also, little Tesla news, the new Model Y launches in China, and the Giga Texas is ramping to produce it too. It is lighter, slightly lighter. It is faster. It has much longer range, and it has all the bells and whistles that the Model 3 has. Very much soundproofed, much better stereo, much better seats, etc. Now we have the world's best car becoming even better. Nobody can touch this. The range on the long range is 447 miles. And you hear people cry all the time. It's like, oh, there's not enough range. Well, I can't drive more than 100 miles without stopping myself for a break. And that's just me. So I doubt many people could drive nearly 500 miles, which at an average speed of 50 miles an hour would take 10 hours. That's just not feasible. Anyhow. Let's get back to a little bit of macro. The foreign exchange world is crashing. On the far left is the Canadian dollar versus the US dollar. The middle is the British pound versus the US dollar. And on the right-hand side is the euro versus the US dollar. You can see the US dollar is the strongest, cleanest shirt in the laundry of all the weak fiat currencies. But there's some pretty distressing stuff happening out there in bond markets, worries about economies, etc. And nobody's buying gilts, treasuries, bonds. Nobody wants them. Everybody knows fiat is going to zero. And that should technically be a boon for Bitcoin, but Bitcoin isn't responding yet. It will one day. We just have to be patient. And good news, this is from Linda Yaccarino. She's the head of Twitter, works very closely with Elon Musk. And she was counteracting a piece of news from Bloomberg. Bloomberg said the top digital officials commit to energetically pushing forward an investigation into whether Elon Musk's X social network breached the bloc's content moderation law. Europe is scrambling to build laws to stop freedom of speech. And Linda correctly says it's essential to democracy that individuals be allowed to have open discussions about politics, free speech, etc. That is the cornerstone of all democracy. And there's no other surrogate to X in having this open discussion in Europe right now. So shout out to all the Europeans. I hope they get their freedom of speech, and I hope they don't let the EU bureaucracy shut them down. Final piece of macro news. These are the odds for a rate cut in January. It looks like we are not going to get one. The current target is 425 to 450, and that's expected to stay with a 93% chance by Jan 29th for the Fed meeting. So do not expect a rate cut. The Fed have lost control of the long end of the yield. They can't control interest rates despite over 100 basis points in cuts so far. And things are spinning out of control. They also have a tough time selling the treasuries. So that's the quick Friday fire, everybody. Busy day today. Hope everybody is well, and I'll catch you later. By the way, drop a comment below. A lot of people are asking me to do what I did with Solana and Bitcoin, but do a Tesla price prediction. There's so much Tesla news out there right now. It's unreal. And I've never been more bullish on the stock, despite the fact it's gone from 106 to 400 approximately and even higher. But the future is not in the going from 400 to 450 or to 600 or whatever. It's the 10x and the 10x after that. That's what's interesting. Let me know if you're interested in that and drop a comment below. Thank you, everybody. Happy Friday. See you tomorrow.